Ross, thanks very much for putting the time away to chat this morning. Really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of your work. Your brand new show, Shipwreck Treasure Hunter, premieres on Sky History on Monday, 18th of April. Do you want to start by giving us a bit of a background as to what the show is, what we can expect, and how the initial idea came about?
The main runway into the Maldives goes out to sea, as you know, there's small atolls. I think the skipper might have had a few too many. Anyway, he managed to run it into this massive runway in the middle of the ocean, and it sunk. And what you can do is, when you do your normal regular paddy, if you go over there, you're not supposed to, but you can go into it and come up inside in an air pocket. And every time someone takes their reg out, more air bubbles into it. So it's continuously being circulated with new fresh air. So I had a conversation, and then the next minute I know I'm doing a diving program. So it wasn't as simple as that. I think there was a bit of a spurious article written, Ross Kemp's near-death experience. I mean, that's absolute bollocks, to be honest with you. Tish and pish. I had to train from open water to advanced diver, then advanced rescue diver. That took like a month and a half, virtually every day. And then after that, it got very serious when I started doing my health and safety executive course. I never envisaged myself, Alex, kneeling on a container at 20 meters in a green pond, a very large green, very nice pond outside of Raysbury in Heathrow, calling into a mic on a full face mask for pieces of scaffolding and clips to come down, untying them from a bowline, assembling a piece of scaffolding, a box scaffolding, disassembling it, and then tying it to a bowline and yanking it for them to take it back up. There was a surreal moment for a second where I thought, hang on a minute, didn't I go to drama school for 3 years to do Stanislavski technique, tap dancing and fencing, not put scaffolding together at 20 meters? It was a fantastic experience in terms of just the training. And then it got probably serious because, learning to do it in a quarry is one thing. Doing it in the actual sea with currents and tides is a very different experience. If I was going to say in essence what this is about, it's a history program, but it has natural, true jet. You're involved with the ocean. You're also underneath it. Just doing anything at sea is dangerous enough, but if you're underneath it, there's a chance you might not come up. A very slim chance, but there is a chance. The great thing about it for me is that history can often appear on the page quite boring, and I mean that in a nice way, because I actually love history, and I don't mind whether I'm reading it from a book or from a tablet, or I'm actually going out and actually seeing it. Very untangible. You can't touch it. You can't get in it. It's behind a glass screen. Whereas when you dive on a wreck, you've got this very privileged experience of actually having a tangible connection to that piece of history. And when you go down there and you sit in the conning tower, sadly, that when that went down, 50 people died inside it, and they didn't die automatically. Some of them did, but others were trapped at either end of it, forward and aft, for a number of days. And when you go into the story, you hear that they were, in darkness, probably with matches, cigarettes. They were carving little bits of wood, and they were trying to flood these pieces of wood out through the torpedo tubes. Sadly, the messages that they carved, like M2's gone down, number 2 hatch open, please help, were only found on a beach in Cornwall, which is 3 counties away from where it went down, or 2 counties away from where it went down. And that was months after it actually sank. And then there's also a little bit of who do you think you are in it, because I had no idea that my great-great-grandfather came over from Ireland. He set up a barge company in Portsmouth. He then decided to buy a pub called the Ship and Castle, which still exists, which I go to, and I meet a relative. And she tells me about my great-grandfather Pop, who was shipwrecked once in the First World War and shipwrecked twice in the Second World War. I also go to a church where many of my family are buried.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the shipwrecks that you do actually uncover, and I think you've kind of touched on this already, is a former slave ship near Plymouth.
You can't hide your history when you're diving. We may not, particularly my generation, that wasn't on the syllabus to talk about all the bad things that happened in this country.
Still wasn't when I was in school either.
So I think it's very important that when we we find things like that. We put them in programs like this. There is a cross feeling, because when you find the cannons and you're looking for these things, the first time we went down, we couldn't find them. We knew we had signature from above. When you got down there, you couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And so you do spirals, and eventually you're running out of air. You go, well, we think it's here, and you kind of basically go around, like in a murder scene when you're looking for a murder weapon. And eventually, which this was a murder weapon, effectively, these were cannons that were able to be turned in on the people, the enslaved people on the actual vessel. And then you start looking into the history of slaving, and you work out that Hawkins was by far the richest man in Britain at the time. All his money was made on the back of enslaved people. And when you look also into what happened when they got to Africa, how they bought slaves off people in Africa, or they just went into villages, killed people, and then stole the human beings that were left. And that's not part of our history that we often like to talk about. And I think it's important in programs like this that we draw attention to it.
Did you personally learn more about the British Empire's relationship with slavery through, uncovering the shipwreck and what you found on board?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I heard of blockade runners, and we're not talking now about as early in British history as a relationship with the slave trade. But even after, and let's bear in mind, we did, William Wilberforce helped to abolish slavery in the UK. And what was happening in the United States some 20, 30 years after was the War of the Confederacy, where, they separated from the Union and formed their own effective country, which wanted to keep the slave trade going. What I wasn't aware of was that even though the British government at the time didn't condone the Confederacy, they certainly didn't speak up that, even though they'd actually banned slavery in the UK by then. And businessmen, unscrupulous businessmen, were selling ships to the Confederacy to use as blockade runners to beat the blockade the Union had put around southern because they had no armaments factories, so they couldn't make cannons, artillery pieces. And so those things had to be sailed in by very fast boats, and those boats were supplied by unscrupulous British businessmen. And we actually dive on one of those. And I had no idea about that. And also, it's believed and reckoned by historians that had those British businessmen not been involved in that trade of blockade running, then that would come to an end 2 years earlier, saving thousands of lives and freeing African Americans from bondage.
Has this left you with the perception that more needs to be done within British schools to teach people about the realities of the slave trade and our relationship? And
well, I think, Alex, I'm not an expert. I'm not at school at the moment, and my kids to know about it. But I think it effectively it should be on the syllabus. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we should be aware of all parts of our history. And history by its very nature isn't all good. And then again, it isn't all bad. And I think you should celebrate the things that are good, and many good things have happened in the history of these islands. And we should also acknowledge the things that weren't good. The reason that I like history is because it hopefully teaches us not to make the same mistakes again, though, as we can see what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, that isn't always the case.
You've touched on the training that you had to do for Shipwreck Treasure Hunter towards the beginning. I know you're someone who's always been into their recreational training as well. Can you tell me a bit more about how fit and how in shape and how difficult the training that you had to go through was for this new show?
Oh, am I any fit? I mean, I'm getting old, mate. Look.
Hey, the guns are still there, though.
The guns are still hanging in there.
Yeah.
No, then. I mean, I went and did 5-minute rounds yesterday. Just pad work. And kick in, and I did an hour's weight training before that. And you know what? I don't play golf. I'm not interested. I don't play tennis. I don't play five-a-side. My fitness comes from going down the gym or going to the Jodo and having a bit of a laugh. Are my diving buddies the fittest I've ever met? No, but they've got a bit about them. I think you have to have a bit of tenacity about you, particularly wreck divers. I mean, it is by the very nature of it dangerous, and sadly people die every year diving on wrecks in the UK. The UK is not easy waters. You know, it's not like diving in the Maldives. It's not like diving in the Red Sea. Some of the training, I mean, it's a 5-hour exam at the end, a 3-hour and a 2-hour paper. I wasn't expecting to do that, 50 years, or not 40 years or whatever it is, 20, 30 years after leaving school, 35 years after leaving school. And you have to get it right, particularly the medical side of stuff, because people, get the bends. People hurt themselves. These are sharp, jagged places to be, and it's very easy to get pierced. It's about being mentally fit as much as it is about being physically fit and being prepared to jump off the side of a boat and go down a shot line into an abyss, not being knowing where you're going to end up. Hopefully you're going to end up. But one instance, we missed the boat. We were that close to it. We were literally, I would say, 4 arm lengths away from it, maybe 5. And we were supposed to land on the back of the bow, the bow at the front. And we missed it completely and hit the seabed at 35, 40 meters, where your air just gets burnt up. And it was only when we were coming back up, we realized that we could actually see the actual boat. I literally put my hand to see my depth gauge. I literally had to hold it up to my mast to see it. I couldn't see it at arm's length, and it's luminous. It's not like it's just, a normal, regular watch face. Yeah. It is by the nature dangerous, but also it's incredible fun. There's a great feeling of camaraderie when you're doing it, and there's a great thing about discovery. And I was out with Mallory again in Plymouth, and we found part of the amethyst. Now, what does that mean? I mean, if you'd even said that to me 6 months ago, yeah, and so what? But to find a piece of what was at the time the most famous frigate in the Royal Navy, when it literally was considered to be like, I don't know, a boxer. Like a world champion boxer. It was the Mike Tyson of its generation in terms of battleships or frigates. And it was loved by nations. It was, the prize of the Royal Navy at the time. And it ended up, through negligence of a captain, ending up sinking on the other side of Plymouth Sound. It dragged its anchors. And, but to find it, I mean, if you said to me again, Alex, 6-7 months ago, Ross, you're going to get so excited with a metal detector scrubbing away at the bottom of Plymouth Sound and then finding a piece of copper yay big, I'd have said, yeah, okay, carry on drinking. But I really enjoyed it. And I get now why people go off with metal detectors into East Anglia at the weekend, hoping to find an Anglo-Saxon bracelet or whatever, which is finding that bit of that ship and to know the history directly attached to it. And, it's got the little crow's feet insignia on it. So, it's Royal Navy, it's part of the amethyst. And and stuff like that. There's all of a sudden history becomes very tangible, as I said. You can feel it. And I've never experienced that before. And it was, it was special.
And that must have resonated with you, particularly considering the history of your own family that you've discovered as well. So being able to kind of tangibly engage with your past, did that kind of apply as well when you were holding?
Yeah, there was. I mean, I was quite, I never knew these guys, but they're my family. People say, who would you like as your dinner guests if you could have anyone from history? I'd honestly like to meet them. I mean, they were awfully young when they died, but I'd like to have met them. My nana often talked about them, referred to them. They were really, obviously runs in the family. They were very good looking. They had more hair than me. But they were really fit lads as well. They used to swim from Portsmouth out to the Isle of Wight. These were really young men in their prime, and sadly, lost to a German battleship in the Straits of Denmark. That's quite a poignant moment when I started talking to them. I didn't realise it would affect me in the way. But slightly emotional about it, to be honest. I could barely remember Pop because I was only about 3 or 4, but I knew he had a pipe. And then when we were down in Scarp, we found some pipes on the seabed. And of course it's not his pipe, but there's automatically this kind of connection to a part of my family. So for me, it works on lots of levels. There's jeopardy, there's real history. You're touching it, you're seeing it. And, there's a part of a discovery about, my mum's side of the family.
You mentioned jeopardy there. You're no stranger to danger. You've worked with some of the most dangerous people
living in this household, not with 3 kids.
You've been to some of the most dangerous places on the planet as well. How do you, and you've done this for decades now, how do you continually mentally prepare for what you do?
I don't think you ever get complacent. I think if you've seen people sadly die out on the ground, and you know that it is a realistic probability, so you have to actually prepare, as I always prepare before I go to any hostile environment. I'm not presently going to one, and I'm very much aware there are a lot of people, journalists particularly, out there now in the Ukraine. My heart goes out to them and to their families and to all the people in Ukraine, obviously. But yeah, I think the thing is never to be complacent, and you're definitely not when you're diving. So the kit that you wear when you're wreck diving is very different to the kit that I would have worn doing my open water. So you can't have a reg in your mouth because you're talking. And also, Alex, from just a novel point of view, it's the first time I've ever seen a program, I don't think it's been made, where you've got two people conversing with each other at depth about the history of a wreck. You know, you might get one person talking to camera, but you rarely see two people having oh, look, here's a 30 mil shell. Oh, let's put that in the bag. Oh, here's a teacup. It's broken. Let's have a cup of tea, Ross. Let's put that in the bag. So, or you start talking about breach blocks, or you talk about aspects of the wreck that show that it must have blown up, or it can't possibly have blown up. So there's a little bit of detective work going on at the same time, but it's being done by two people talking at depth. And when you think about that, you know, that's not easy, really, doing that on ground. Some people can't manage to have a conversation and shoot it very well when it's just two people talking to each other, right? Well, try doing it at 25 meters or 30 meters, you know, in very murky water. It becomes even more difficult. In terms of a technical achievement, you know, my hat goes off to the two cameramen that worked on it. It's a really new way of telling history, I think. I think it's been done. Single people diving and being a presenter has been done, but the fact that there's an expert and there's me, the non-expert, who's on a voyage of discovery.
Going back to the element of danger that you mentioned there, you know, that clip of your encounter with the gang in Papua New Guinea goes viral every kind of few weeks on social. I've got to ask, was that every bit as frightening as it seemed, and how did you keep your cool in that moment?
I mean, it's not as bad as being shot at, is it? I mean, that's totally different, and I've been shot at a few times. Like most of those things, and even when you're being shot at, in the moment, you are basically trying to get as low as possible. When the guys pulled the guns on us, and what you couldn't see were the guys with spears, and I just really didn't want to get speared. And there were rumors that these guys raped both men and women. The main thing was to try and quell it as quickly as possible and then see where we were, because there was no one there to help us. We were, hundreds of miles from any town. And even in Port Moresby, you have to be very careful. People just get lifted off the street, mugged and beaten and stabbed. So there was no one that was going to come and help us. And I thought it was the best way of quelling the situation at the time. And also bear in mind, I may look like I'm being brave, but there's a cameraman filming that entire thing. He never took the camera off the action that was going on. And he's looking through a map in black and white, right? I've got 360. I can see what's going on. And Jonathan, the cameraman, had a gun in his back and he didn't even know. Issues like that and things like that, it's not in the moment that you feel petrified. It's generally afterwards. It's when you actually go, did that really just fucking happen? To be honest with you, excuse my French. And I remember doing a piece to camera after we got away from there. The locals were going, they were apologising, going, yeah, we're really sorry, we should never have met those people. I said, no, don't worry about that. But there's a sense, I don't know if you've ever been burgled. Have you been burgled? Ever had someone break into your house to steal something out of your house? You sort of feel like you've been invaded slightly. It sort of felt like that. It felt like someone had taken my just like slightly knocked my dignity. And I suddenly got angry about it. It was a bit after the event. But, obviously they were doing what they do. And if you're going to go into their back garden and stir things up, expect happen occasionally, and that's just part and parcel of doing those kind of documentaries and those kind of investigations.
Going back to Shipwreck Treasure Hunter, this has you, back in the UK, or at least around the British coastline. You've done a lot with on land in the UK as well. What would you say has been the kind of the most dangerous UK city you visited?
I couldn't. I saw that question, Alex. There isn't one dangerous city. You know, there are dangerous people out there, all right? But they're not the norm, and they're not in the main. And you know that, and I know that. But if you're going to go looking for them, a good chance you might find a few, all right?
Yeah.
They're like anybody other human. They have their good days and they have their bad days. And if you meet them on a bad day, it could go very, very badly wrong. I think the most important thing that the team and I have always tried to do is to give, whoever they may be, whether it be a heroin dealer, whether it be an armed robber or an arms dealer who I've interviewed, a British arms dealer in the UK who was importing guns into the UK. The reason we got that interview is because they know that we are scrupulous in terms of not giving away identities, not even wanting to know identities. So long as they're saying is truth, then that's good enough for me. And I'm not about to give up sources of people that I interview because I would never get another interview. As I say, there isn't one dangerous city that I've ever been to. I think I've met dangerous people all over the UK, and I've met a lot of dangerous people all over the world. They do exist. But also there's often a reason for that behavior. And that's what intrigues me, is how did you get to be in this position?
Through most of your work, at least in recent years, on Extreme World, Ross Kemp, on gangs, and even, you know, on Shipwreck Treasure Hunter, I guess there's a public perception of you as this kind of alpha male, kind of hard man image. Is that a label that you think is accurate and that you're personally happy with?
I said I was a tap dancer earlier, Alex. I mean, come on. No, it depends. It depends where you want to be, isn't it? I mean, I've just done a game show for the BBC. What a weird year last year was. I did a game show for the BBC. I was diving on wrecks. I was, you know, and then I also made a documentary about a famous pop star. You know, it couldn't have been more different. And I think, you know, variety is the spice of life. You know, whether I want to stay in 2-star hotels, looking up at the ceiling and wondering how that stain got, how did that stain get up there? And what is that effectively, that stain? For the rest of my life is probably a no. But no, I enjoy being on the road. I don't think I want to do it as much as I used to. I'm getting too old and I've got too many demands on me from my kids. But in terms of the bracketing tough, Ross, what is it, TV tough guy? I mean, what's that about? I mean, what is that about? But if that's what it's not keeping me up at night, Alex, that's for sure. Children are keeping me up at night. The fear of unemployment's keeping me up at night, but not TV tough guy is not keeping me up at
night. Ross, I know you're a busy guy. I've had a lot of fun chatting to you this morning, and I'm looking forward to watching your new show. I really appreciate you putting so much of your time aside to chat to me.
Thank you, Alex. Great talking to you.